Today's talk is on burnout, and burnout is something that affects all of us in one way or another. Needless to say, a disclosure at first, I am not a doctor. I am not here to diagnose you with burnout, but if some of this feels familiar to you, which it probably will, you might want to talk to a professional. So I care about this subject a lot because I myself have burnt out several times over the course of several careers, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But today I want to focus on why I think burnout exists and some of the ways that you can identify it. And for the managers in the room, I'll tell you how you might be burning your people out and give you some simple tips to keep you from doing it again in the future. But before we dive in, I think it's probably helpful to start with the definition of burnout, because burnout can actually be kind of difficult to describe because it's not necessarily a medical condition in itself, but according to the APA Dictionary of Psychology, burnout is defined as physical, emotional, or mental exhaustion accompanied by decreased motivation, lowered performance, and negative attitudes towards oneself and others. And that might seem familiar. I know I'm in it right now. So be honest, how many of you are experiencing burnout? Just kind of hands up in the chat. None of you. I don't believe you. We will move on. The good and the bad news is that a lot of you are probably experiencing this because employee well-being is kind of a new workplace imperative, especially since the pandemic and with the market as it is right now. And we're hearing our bosses talk a lot about employee morale, and the term quiet quitting is kind of taking over the internet. And a recent Gallup study cited that actually about 74% of workers have experienced burnout, and 40% said that they experienced it specifically during the pandemic. And I don't know about you, but I actually found those numbers to be kind of shocking. And it's really hard to recover from burnout. And oftentimes people will leave entire industries trying to escape it. For example, I used to be a commercial photographer, and I was also a website designer. I did a lot of things. I ran my own consulting business. And as you can also see, I was also a graphic designer. You can probably tell by my slides. My business wasn't failing. In fact, it was really profitable, but I had been burning out over about 10 years. And the burnout cycle ended that I had decided to leave an entire industry, learn a completely new skill, and enter the corporate workforce again in my 30s, which is no easy feat. So why are we like this? I have a theory. I think that there are a couple of factors here, but the one I'd like to talk about today is status. A status symbol used to be like a nice car or a fancy watch. Maybe you lived in a really nice house. The point is that your success was visible to the world. But now, next slide, it's kind of being busy. It's keeping up with the Joneses along with the fancy watch or a nice car. I see a lot of you pre-ordering your Teslas, maybe not anymore. And so if somebody asks you how you're doing, like imagine somebody says, hey, how are you doing? The normal answer is, I'm really tired or I'm super busy. It's because we are overscheduled. We even overschedule our kids and our vacations. If your calendar isn't filled with back-to-back meetings, are you even important? If you're not sharing a selfie at every tourist trap, did you even vacation? By the way, this is Hootie the Owl. If you're looking for a good owl cafe in Tokyo, hit me up. I got you. Which kind of brings me to the next thing, social media. Social media is fully involved in every aspect of our daily lives, and we are more online than ever. We're constantly sharing the highlight reels, but it's not enough just to be on social media anymore. Many of us want to be influencers. We want all of the followers, all of the engagement, and we spend a lot of time trying to keep up with our peers. And oftentimes we prioritize this public perception over our own mental health. And through social psychology, we actually know that social media negatively increases the frequency of our own self-evaluation, of our appearance, our health, our family, our jobs. And I like to say that every like equals one serotonin. And it might not be too far from the truth because my heart flutters every time I see a notification. I'm going to date myself here. It's kind of like that Sally Fields 1985 Oscars speech where she's like, you can't deny the fact that you like me. You really like me. And that's normal because as humans, we require connection and a sense of belonging. And we know that That belonging reduces anxiety, stress, and depression. Socializing helps us learn to navigate and cope with life's challenges, and it can boost our self-esteem. It can also help us avoid loneliness while increasing joy and happiness. So in a lot of ways, social media helps create those connections, but the life that we lead on social media is an idealized version of ourselves. So we're not connecting authentically. So it's no wonder we're stressed out and tired. Next slide. We're constantly trying to keep up. We're constantly doom scrolling, and we're constantly available. If I don't answer my phone, will people think that I'm lazy or unreliable? What if they reach out to somebody else instead? How can I be the hero in this situation and all situations? And this needs to be constantly available mentality leads me to what I like to call the hero syndrome. The addiction to being a hero was no different than any other addiction. As a hero, you spend most of your time trying to save the day and not nearly enough time sharing knowledge and skills with other people. And that lack of knowledge transfer causes what I like to call many single points of failure across your business, or also known as the lotto factor. So let's say, for example, that Jane, who works as a software engineer in a fast-growing startup, Jane wins the lottery tomorrow. She's definitely not coming to work. Who is going to pick up her work then? Because no matter how talented, hardworking, or heroic Jane might be, she's ultimately doing a disservice to herself and the rest of her team, because no human can keep up this pace forever, and you will eventually burn out, and that leaves your coworkers to pick up the slack. The point is, don't be a hero. It's not worth it. So the next thing I want to talk about is kind of the burnout cycle in action here. So how long do you think it takes to recover from burnout? The answer surprised me, and you can see it here. Experts say it can take 2 years to recover from burnout, which makes a lot of sense because it probably took you just as long to get there in the first place. Burnout doesn't happen over a single project. It's caused by repetitive stress and lack of work-life balance over several years. And the trouble is that by the time you feel like you're burning out, it's probably too late. And that's why taking your vacation doesn't always help. If you're taking your vacation and you're not feeling refreshed afterwards, then you're likely burnt out. Vacation should be a proactive effort versus reactive. So now that we've talked about some of the reasons why I think burnout exists, let's talk about the burnout cycle in more depth. The first phase is the honeymoon phase. This is when we take on a new project, we're really happy, we're committed, energetic, we're creative, we're having fun solving hard problems. And this is especially true if it's a new job. There's a compulsion to want to prove yourself. So your productivity levels and problem solving skills are kind of at an all-time high. Phase 2 is the onset of stress. This phase of burnout begins with an awareness that some days are more difficult than others. You find that you're just not as optimistic as you once were. You're avoiding making decisions. You're more tired than normal, like tired all day and working when you're supposed to be sleeping. Does that sound familiar? Phase 3 is neglecting yourself. By this point, people are postponing self-care just to get the job done. I have pepperoni pizza on my keyboard now. Never awesome to eat at your desk. So maybe you're ordering takeout because you just don't have enough time to cook a healthy meal, or maybe you're like eating your kids' dino nuggets and just dunking them in ketchup and sadness. Another example might be canceling plans because you just can't enjoy a night out without looming workload. Some people might be engaging in unhealthy coping strategies like drinking too much just to get their mind to stop racing. Phase 4 is interpersonal problems at home and at work, and you can see me holding 2 of my 3 kids. The little one is a little bit bigger now. But is your partner checking in? The vibe is just kind of generally off. There's a tension you can't really put your finger on, but work is really stressful, and that stress is starting to bleed into your personal life. You're snapping at your kids, you're canceling plans, and the things that you used to love just aren't as much fun anymore. Does it sound a little bit like depression? That is because burnout is often diagnosed as depression. And when I've reached this phase, I'm just not present anymore. I feel like I'm failing somebody in some capacity. Either I feel like I'm being a bad parent or a bad coworker, a bad wife. And at this point, it feels like I'm failing everyone. So why bother trying to please anyone? Phase 5 is reduced performance and cognitive problems. Burnout and chronic stress are known to interfere with our ability to pay attention and concentrate. So distracted breaks become much longer and you just can't seem to concentrate no matter how hard you try. And that's because when we are stressed, our attention narrows. And so even small tasks become a huge burden. So you spend your afternoon on TikTok instead of tackling, I don't know, anything on your to-do list. Phase 6 is you just can't get excited about work anymore. Now I'm feeling a bit cynical about my working conditions and even my coworkers, and I can't seem to get ahead. And my workload is so large that I wouldn't even know how to ask for help. Phase 7 is physical symptoms. So experts know that chronic stress can create real health problems like digestive issues, heart disease, and depression. And according to an ITA group study, employees who say they are burnt out are 23% more likely to visit an emergency room. When you're tired all day and your workload is so overwhelming that it's keeping you up at night, of course, that is going to trigger something physical. And phase 8 is total burnout. Here you can see my soul departing into the great work stream in the sky. I am just not present anymore. It's at this point that I don't trust myself. I doubt whether or not I'm even qualified for my job. Is it imposter syndrome? Is it burnout? Why not both? By now, I feel like the only way that I can recover is by finding a new job. And spoiler alert, a new job won't fix it either. It's just a Band-Aid for a much larger problem. And so this next slide isn't a phase. If you can go back one to visualizing burnout. This next one isn't a phase. It's a visual representation of what burnout looks like. And I thought that this was really interesting. This came from my friend, Johnny Holloman. You can clearly see the burnout cycle in action here. And Johnny said that what got him there was actually 5 years working day and night on his own app. In years 1 to 2, you can see like a really strong commit history. And by the middle of year 3, it starts to taper off. And by year 4, he's fully burnt out. There have been some studies in recent years that evaluate open source and burnout. And for the most part, developers say that contributing to open source actually gives them energy, which makes sense. But in some cases like Johnny's, where we see that maintaining projects to make a living can actually increase your risk of burnout. And that will not be a surprise to anyone in the room who has maintained an open source project before. As you know, it's really hard to say no, and that alone can lead to burnout. But we'll talk about boundary setting a bit. So what can you do to avoid burnout? If you're feeling any of what I just said, the good news is there really are things that you can do about it. It's really hard. Many of us have been there before, but let me give you 7 tips. The first is to get clarity. So there are several studies on burnout. There should be more in my opinion, but a Gallup study cited that actually only half of workers know what's expected of them. And all workers, regardless of age or stage in their career, want to know what's expected of them. And those lack of clear expectations can cause anxiety and frustration. Even if the employees feel energized and motivated, those who lack clear expectations and spend too much time working on the wrong things can't create value for their organizations, and they will exhaust themselves just trying to figure out what they were supposed to be doing. Number 2 is to stop multitasking. You're not good at it. I promise you're not good at it. Multitasking actually reduces your productivity because your brain really can only focus on one thing at a time. The more we multitask, the less we achieve. Because we divide our attention, we don't allow enough space for deeper processing and learning. This continued context switching can also lead to burnout. So if you're at capacity and your manager says, I need you to do one more thing, then ask your manager to help you prioritize your to-do list. What thing can you drop in order to take on this new thing? The short answer is it can't be the baby. I can't drop the baby. Number 3 is to set healthy boundaries. We cannot be mad at our managers for asking us what we can handle. We are all adults and your manager expects you to know and communicate your limits. Saying no helps you and your coworkers. Back again to the hero syndrome. Your entire organization actually benefits from you setting healthy boundaries because when you're burnt out, who has to pick up your workload? Likely your peers. And burnout is contagious. It creates both upstream and downstream implications for everyone involved. Number 4 is to take control of your notifications. Every time your phone buzzes and you get that shot of dopamine, your body is also tensing and reacting. It's spending energy needlessly. Unless you were on pager duty, there's really not much that can't wait until tomorrow. Number 5 is to find something outside of work you are passionate about. And this is me nicely asking you a hobby. Something that's challenging and engaging, because with hobbies are less likely to suffer from stress and depression. And this next statement is really good timing on this, considering the mass layoffs across the industry, because when you stake your whole self-worth on your job, you become less resilient to things like layoffs and negative performance reviews. It also makes it really hard to switch off at night and set those healthy boundaries. Number 6 is to have a clear separation between home and work. And I understand that having a dedicated office space is a privilege that not everyone has, but where you work in your home plays a huge role in your productivity. If you work in front of the TV, you're basically setting yourself up for an unplanned Netflix marathon. But the point is that having a dedicated workspace creates that's a healthy distance from your relaxing and eating. Stay focused. And that is really important for healthy work-life balance. Number 7 seems common sense, but it's actually really not. Get enough sleep. Sleep deprivation and burnout go hand in hand. The National Sleep Foundation did a study that says sleeping less than 6 hours a night is one of the best predictors of on-the-job burnout. Most of us have an awareness that sleeping better helps us perform better, but the hard part is actually putting this into practice. One of the questions, or one of the things that came from the poll, was that we learned about only 10% of American adults prioritize their sleep. I am not within the 10%. And 0% of children prioritize their parents' sleep. This next section, I believe, is the most important. Arguably the most important, because I personally believe that poor management is directly responsible for burnout. Feel free to quote me on that. So Harvard Business Review survey cited that 58% of people trust a stranger more than they trust their own boss. And employees who feel strongly supported by their managers are 70% less likely to burn out. So here are some tips. 1 is to be clear about your expectations. I made this comic as a joke. Here you are in a one-on-one with your boss, and out of nowhere, they're asking you about the status of a project you didn't even know you were on. These are the unspoken objectives, and I am totally nailing them. How many people here have experienced this over your career? I'm guessing most of you. As a manager, it is your job to remove the guesswork that causes anxiety. Make sure you are communicating often and repeat yourself until you're sick of hearing it, because the average person needs to hear something 7 times before they act on it. Side note, this is a great tip for when you need to get the dishes or laundry done. My husband asks me 7 times. Just kidding, he does it. Number 3 is to help people understanding their value. Why is actually meaning and purpose. It's there to guide you and your employees through the day-to-day, and when employees know why they're doing something, they will be more enthusiastic and dedicated, because everyone wants to know that what they are doing is meaningful. Otherwise, what's the point? Number 3 is to enforce reasonable work hours. And that doesn't always mean 9 to 5. My working hours might not be your working hours, but the point is that if a project is taking somebody 80 hours a week to complete, then as a manager, I have a resource problem I need to solve. Number 4 is try not to send email or messages after working hours. Do not underestimate the influence that you have on your team. People will feel obligated to respond, even if you tell them that they do not have to, because it doesn't matter what you say, it only matters what you do. 5, please encourage people to take all of their vacation time, and you take yours as well. Model the behavior that you want to see. And many people don't take vacation because they have anxiety about the work that they will have when they return. So before people go out on vacation, help them figure out how to manage that workload so that they can truly relax. What can you take off of their plate? Number 6, and I see this a lot, have regular one-on-ones and actively listen. Do people sound stressed or overworked? Can you take something off of their plate? If you're taking notes, During the one-on-one, you are not actively listening. Remember what I said about multitasking, you're not good at it. I suggest that at the meeting, you recap by saying what I heard was, and repeat back what you heard, and then send them an email recap afterwards. 7, this one's really important. Don't only recognize the big wins. Our jobs are mainly a combination of small wins, but managers tend to only recognize the big ones. And lastly, if the people in your life are telling you to slow down, then listen to them, because those are the people that know you best and want what's best for you. So we're all in this together. If any of you have questions, I will be in the chat for a while. Also, my LinkedIn will be posted, and I'll also post my Twitter. I am available to any of you. Thank you.